When it comes to our democracy, there are several key factors that make it up. Of course, this is manifested in several ways, and I chose one of the stranger ones. Video games are a great example of this because they have complete control over what they could be, and I'm here to show some pretty good examples of this. Now, if you haven't tried a Monster Hunter game, please go do that. They are absolutely worth it. But I'm not here to talk about Monster Hunter itself, but its Japanese anime-like cousin, God Eater, specifically God Eater 3. I may be going out of order here, but these apply really well. In our democracy, majority rule is seen as who most of the people want as president. In God Eater 3, however, majority rule is seen as what all the people in the party want to hunt. To keep it short, all players have to ready up to hunt, meaning it's more or less unanimous agreement. Funnily enough, this segues into the other good representation here, which is compromise. In a full party, you're bound to compromise on what hunts to do, and it is what it is after all, much like how in real life you have to compromise on what you can and can't do. Now, I know fighting games and equality don't exactly mix well, but hear me out. I'm not just using... I know I play this a lot, but I'm not going to waste your time with the title, so we'll just call it Uniclear for short. In any real fighting game, all characters are equal. Not one is better than the other, and if they end up being that way, a balance patch comes in making any buffs and nerfs that need to be made. It's not really playing who's meta, so to speak, but who you enjoy playing as a whole. The same applies to real life, as equality is defined as all persons in America are entitled to equal rights and treatment under the law. Now on to the opposite end of the equality spectrum. I'm sure most people have heard of Final Fantasy XIV, but if you somehow haven't, well, it's so popular that for 6 weeks straight it wasn't being sold. When the latest expansion Endwalker released, so many people logged in that the player queue went upwards into the 10,000s. And said queue prioritized people paying a subscription rather than the free trial players. Anyways, on to how FF14 somehow ties into all of this. It makes sense, hear me out. Minority rule is described as protecting the few from oppression, and that same logic applies in one simple mechanic, the loot system. Say you're in a dungeon and the party gets a loot drop. You have 3 options: need, greed, and pass. Without going too in depth, unless everyone votes, the loot isn't distributed, meaning if you fall in the minority of the party that forgets to cast your roll, don't worry, it happens, you won't miss your chance of getting the loot at all. As for citizenship, which is described as the common thread of all Americans, the same can be applied as owning a subscription. Now, how exactly do you take the pathway to becoming a citizen in Final Fantasy XIV exactly? A little known something called the free trial. Once you buy the game, you can pick up right where you left off too. Just like the dignity of the individual, all players are guaranteed life, liberty, and due process under law. Which I guess law in this case would be reporting it to Square Enix. But of course, where does individual freedom fit in? Well, all games have this. You're allowed to play how you see fit after all. A great example of this would be Genshin Impact. But of course, where does individual freedom fit in? Well, all games have this. You're allowed to play how you see fit after all. A great example of this would be Genshin Impact.